Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the English Learning Podcast. I'm Jason, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Julia. How are you doing today, Julia?
I'm doing great, Jason. Excited about today's topic because I know it's something many English learners struggle with.
Absolutely. So, here's a question for you, our listeners. Do you often find yourself translating from your native language into English while speaking? If the answer is yes, don't worry. You're not alone.
Yes, this is a very common problem. Many learners translate sentences in their heads before speaking, and that slows them down. It makes conversations difficult and sometimes even frustrating.
And that's exactly why today's episode is all about thinking in English instead of translating. We're going to share some practical tips that will help you train your brain to think directly in English, so you can speak more fluently and naturally.
That's right. And by the end of this episode, you'll have clear steps to stop translating and start thinking in English effortlessly.
So stick with us and let's dive right in. All right, let's get into it. Why do so many English learners translate in their heads before speaking?
Great question, Jason. One of the biggest reasons is habit. Most learners start by studying English through their native language, so their brain gets used to thinking in their first language first, then converting words into English.
Exactly. And that habit can be hard to break. Another reason is lack of confidence. When learners are not sure if they're using the right words or grammar, they feel the need to translate everything to make sure it's correct.
Yes, and that slows them down. Imagine if you're having a conversation but constantly pausing to translate. By the time you find the right words, the conversation has already moved on.
That's so true. It also makes speaking feel stressful instead of natural. And let's not forget about fear of making mistakes. Some learners think if they don't translate, they might say something wrong.
Right. But actually, trying to be too perfect makes it harder to improve. Language is all about communication, not perfection. Even native speakers make mistakes, but they don't stop to translate. They just keep going.
That's a great point. And here's something interesting. Our brain is naturally wired to learn languages through exposure, not translation. That's how babies learn. They don't translate words. They hear, understand, and use them directly.
Exactly. So if we want to speak English fluently, we have to train our brain to think in English instead of relying on translation.
And don't worry, we're going to show you how to do that. But before that, let's talk about why thinking in English is so important for fluency. All right, now that we understand why many learners translate in their heads, let's talk about why you should train your brain to think directly in English. Julia, what's one of the biggest benefits of thinking in English?
Well, the most obvious one is fluency. When you stop translating, your speech becomes faster and more natural. You don't have to pause and think about every word. You just speak.
That's a great point. Think about how native speakers talk. They don't stop and translate. They just express their thoughts instantly. And if you can train your brain to do that, your conversations will feel much smoother.
Exactly. Another benefit is better listening skills. When you think in English, your brain gets used to processing English words and phrases quickly, which helps you understand spoken English much better.
That's so true. A lot of learners struggle with listening because they're still thinking in their native language. But when you start thinking in English, it becomes easier to catch words, phrases, and even different accents.
Right. And here's another benefit: better confidence. When you stop relying on translation, you trust yourself more. You don't get stuck worrying about whether your sentence is perfect. You just communicate naturally.
And confidence makes a huge difference. Think about it. When you hesitate and translate, you feel nervous. But when you think in English, you feel more in control of the conversation.
Absolutely. And here's something really interesting. Thinking in English also helps with memory and retention. When you learn words and phrases in English and use them in your thoughts, your brain remembers them much better than if you were just memorizing translations.
Yes! Instead of memorizing word lists and their meanings in your language, you actually start using the words in real-life situations. That's what makes them stick.
So, to sum it up, thinking in English helps you speak faster, listen better, feel more confident, and remember words more effectively. And the best part? Anyone can train their brain to do it.
That's right. And in the next section, we'll give you some powerful techniques to help you start thinking in English today. Stay with us. All right, now comes the most important part. How do you actually train your brain to think in English? Julia, where should we start?
Let's start with something simple. Naming objects around you in English. This is an easy exercise you can do anytime. Just look around and say the names of things you see in English. For example, if you're in your room, you can think bed, lamp, window, notebook, phone.
That's a great tip. And if you want to take it further, try making simple sentences about what's happening. Like instead of just saying lamp, you could think the lamp is on. Or I need to turn off the lamp before I sleep.
Exactly. This way, you start forming English sentences in your mind even when you're not speaking out loud. And that leads to the next strategy, describing your daily routine in English.
Oh, I love this one. Throughout your day, try to describe what you're doing in English. For example, in the morning, you can think I'm brushing my teeth. Now I'm making coffee. I need to check my emails.
Yes, even if you don't say these sentences out loud, just thinking them in English helps your brain get used to the language. And speaking of sentences, another great strategy is talking to yourself in English.
That's a fun one. It might feel strange at first, but talking to yourself in English, either in your head or out loud, really helps. You can ask yourself questions like, what should I eat for lunch? Or, what do I need to do today? And then answer them in English.
Yes, and don't worry about making mistakes. No one is listening. The goal is just to train your brain to respond in English without translating.
That's a great point. And here's another useful trick. Reducing dictionary dependence. Instead of looking up translations in your native language, try to find the meaning in English.
Right. For example, if you don't know the word excited, instead of translating it to your language, think of a definition like feeling very happy and energetic about something. This way, you learn English in English.
Yes. And another excellent strategy is using English for small decisions. For example, when you're planning your grocery shopping, make a list in English. Or when you check the time, say in your head, it's 2:30 p.m., I have a meeting soon.
That's a great habit. And of course, one of the best ways to train your brain is immersing yourself in English content, watching English videos, listening to English podcasts, or reading simple English articles.
Yes! And here's an important tip. Try not to use subtitles in your native language. Instead, watch with English subtitles or no subtitles at all. This helps your brain understand words naturally.
Absolutely. The more you surround yourself with English, the faster you'll start thinking in it. So, to summarize, name objects, describe your actions, talk to yourself, use English definitions, make small decisions in English, and immerse yourself in English content.
Exactly. These are powerful techniques, and if you practice them every day, you'll stop translating and start thinking in English naturally.
And up next, we'll talk about some common challenges learners face when trying to think in English and how to overcome them.
All right, now we know how to start thinking in English, but let's be honest, it's not always easy. Julia, What are some common challenges learners face?
One of the biggest challenges is thinking too much about grammar. Many learners worry, am I using the right tense? Is this sentence correct? And that slows them down.
That's a great point. Overthinking grammar can make you feel stuck. The best way to overcome this is to focus on communication, not perfection. Even native speakers make grammar mistakes, but they don't stop talking because of it.
Exactly. Another big challenge is lack of vocabulary. Sometimes learners want to express something, but they don't know the right words, so they switch back to their native language.
Oh yes, I hear this a lot. The trick here is to use simple words. Instead of stopping, try to describe what you mean in another way. For example, if you forget the word refrigerator, you can say, the cold box for food. The key is to keep thinking in English.
That's a great tip. And here's another common challenge, feeling frustrated when you can't find the right words quickly. Sometimes learners feel like their brain is too slow.
That's totally normal. But remember, fluency takes time. If you get stuck, just take a deep breath and keep going. One trick is to pause naturally instead of translating. Native speakers also pause when they speak. It's completely okay.
Yes, instead of thinking, oh no, I don't know this word, just use a filler phrase like, let me think, or how can I say this? This keeps the conversation going while you find the right words.
That's a smart strategy. Another challenge is not having enough English exposure. If you only use English during study time, it's hard to think in English naturally.
Right. The solution? Surround yourself with English as much as possible. Listen to English music, watch English videos, read simple books. Make English a part of your daily life.
Exactly. And one more challenge: fear of making mistakes. Many learners are afraid of thinking in English because they don't want to be wrong.
Oh, that's so common. But mistakes are a natural part of learning. Instead of being afraid, think of every mistake as progress. The more you practice, the better you get.
That's the perfect mindset. So, to summarize, don't overthink grammar. Use simple words, accept pauses, surround yourself with English, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yes, if you keep going, your brain will adjust and soon you'll be thinking in English automatically.
Exactly. And before we wrap up, let's give our listeners a simple daily routine they can follow to train their brain to think in English. Wow, we've covered a lot today. Thinking in English is a powerful skill, and the more you practice, the easier it gets.
Absolutely. And remember, progress takes time. At first, it might feel difficult, but every small step counts. Even just naming objects in English or describing your actions will bring big improvements.
Yes, the key is consistency. If you make English a daily habit, soon you'll stop translating and start thinking in English naturally.
And we believe in you. You are capable of becoming fluent. You just have to keep going and trust the process.
That's right. And if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more tips on learning English. Also, share this episode with a friend who wants to improve their English.
Yes, and tell us in the comments, what's your biggest challenge when thinking in English? We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you for listening, and remember, keep thinking in English, keep practicing, and never give up. See you next time.
Bye for now and happy learning.